All right, I think we're recording. So welcome to the LGBTQ Scouts and Allies workshop on understanding privilege. So we're I'm gonna have a little introduction. We're gonna do an activity all together, and then we will jump into talking kind of what it is privilege, which I know you're all much excited to learn about. So a little about me. My name is Alex Mashmarkey. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I'm the guy on the right there. I'm an Eagle Scout. I've been in scouting for 20 years. I'm professionally a grants administrator for RPI, and I'm an LGBTQ plus safe zone educator. I love teaching this material. All right, a few thanks. Spirit of Adventure Council, I want to thank them. They've kind of pulled all this together, especially Allison, who keeps putting up with my constant Facebook messages, type A personality, and borderline organizational neuroticism. So thank you, Allison. Safe Zone Project team, they're where I pull a lot of my material from. They have a great website, but especially the two people who are kind of the driving force behind it is Meg Bolger and Sam Killerman, and I'm quote them a lot during this, so I figured that. And also I stole a bunch of material from a Harvard Business Review article, so the author Dolly Chu, I'm going to thank her as well in this, because I pulled a bunch of notes from her wonderful article on how to use your privilege, which we'll talk about later. All right. So, why is education important? What do we gain by learning about the LGBT community? So Safe Zone training, which is what I've pulled this from, is a more comprehensive in-person course that I do highly recommend once this is all over and you can do it in person with people. Local LGBT centers, community centers, colleges. Rochester, New York has a Out Alliance school that will come to you. And then there's also me. I will come to you for the price of gas and your favorite local food. I will come teach. So do let me know. But anyway, what is the goal of LGBT education in scouting? It's so that LGBT youth and adults feel safe in a space where they can openly talk about who they are and express their concerns and hopes for the future, especially those around their identity. So in and out of the BSA, as leaders and colleagues, we should aim for this. We need to be able to let people not only know that they are welcome, but they can freely express who they are. And we can not only listen, but understand what they are telling us. But this is the BSA. So obviously we're not gonna be having any conversations surrounding sex with anyone straight or LGBT. It's not a conversation we have. However, being able to listen, articulate LGBT concepts, and guide youth or adults to the correct resources in matters of gender, expression, sexuality shows leadership and empathy that is expected of our leaders. One thing to note when I'm doing a lot of LGBT education, especially around scouting, is I do hear a lot of people say, oh, well, I welcome everybody and I let everybody know that they're safe here. I want to be in a world and have a group where we don't have to have those conversations. And this is a great sentiment, and kudos to you for being inclusive of everybody. We absolutely appreciate that in so many places where LGBT people aren't. But the last part I do want to just address real quick. What I do hear a lot is a world where we don't have to have those conversations. And this is not a goal that we want to aim for. Reason being, I have stolen, oh, if it would move, hold on. Oh, I can't see half the screen. I'm sorry, guys, I got 3 screens, bear with me. So I took this from a Black activist in regards to race. He says, I see no color is not the goal. I see your color and I honor you and I value your input. I will be educated about your lived experiences. I will work against the racism that harms you. You are beautiful. Tell me how to do better. And I found this quote the other day because it's very fresh as far as I know. And you can really take it and not only apply it to race, but to LGBT or to religious issues. So it's one thing I wanted to bring up because it's food for thought. We unfortunately don't live in a world where we can ask for such equality among everyone, and that we can ignore what makes us different. Plus, living in a world where difference is not recognized sounds pretty bland to me, and sort of misses the point that it's our differences that color the world. In the case of LGBT people, we have our rainbow. So with that in mind, let's get into our topic of the day by doing an activity. Yay, this is why you're all on Zoom today, because this is an interactive piece. So we're gonna role play a little bit here. I'm gonna, in a little bit, figure out how to post a list in the chat. I think we have a chat, but anyway, I'll post that in a second. Using the list in the chat box, you're going to role play as if you're in a video game. You're starting your life for the first time. You're a new character. And you're ready to go. You've put your character together. Your character is you. But you have a few character creation perks that are that you have not chosen yet, that are going to give you an up in life. And so you have some leftover points. So everyone's going to get $27 or points. Everyone will look at it. And the cost of the items on the list that I'm about to give you are going to be dependent on things that were chosen in your character creation. So if you happen to be female or a woman, it's going to cost you $2 to buy an item off the list. If you're a man, it's going to cost you $4 if you identify as a man or are born as one, however you want to play that. And if you happen to be under the queer umbrella as an LGBTQ person, and that was your backstory with your character creation, it's only going to cost you $1 per item. And everybody's going to get the 27. So let me see here. Yes, Allison.
I raised my hand. I was looking for the button that lets me raise my hand because the kids always do that too. Do you have to double up? Like if you are female and I identify as LGBTQ+, do you have
no, I will give you the option. It's up to you. If you you could it's probably easier if you just do one group. What?
Would it cost me $3 an item if I am female and LGBTQ?
No, if you're LGBTQ, you get the discount. So you can be a woman and be LGBT, but you get the discount. Same for if you're male and are LGBT, you get the discount. You only have to pay $1. So I just found the chat. Give me a moment. Let me. Oh, actually, hold on. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah.
Does it say privileges for sale?
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh, perfect. There we go. I don't need to copy paste. Okay, perfect. There's all 33 of them. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give you guys about 5 to 10 minutes, take some time, read through them, decide which ones speak out to you, which ones you're going to purchase. And in about 5 to 10 minutes, when everybody's kind of done, we'll have a conversation about what you chose, what you found difficult, what was easy, whatever you guys want to talk about. And then we'll move on from there to the workshop portion. So I'll give you guys some time, and I'll even mute myself for a bit. And we'll see you in about 5 to 10 minutes.
Like you look at him and it's like this guy is getting a fight. He gets his
Alex, you can mute all too.
Zoom. All right, we are back to recording. So we are back. Everyone's had some time to look over the list. So I want to hear from you guys. What did you think of the list?
I think it's a lot easier if you're cis to get the privileges because you don't need to pay anything because you're like, I have these privileges. You know, when I looked at it, I'm like, do I really need to pay for this? I pretty much have it in my life, right?
That's very true. That's actually you beat me to the punch. But that is what this list is. It is a list of cis straight privilege. But I'll definitely come back to that. So did anybody have anything that they were absolutely like right away? They were like, hey, I want this privilege.
So I looked at it the other way. There were 33 of them, and I figured I had to cut 6 out to meet your requirement because I fall under the LGBTQ umbrella. So I was like, okay, what 6 can I cut out? But there were definitely a couple that I was like, oh, I don't want to cut that out, but to meet your requirement, I have to. So like hiding my identity at the doctor, it's not that hard. Like, okay, fine, because I'm still female. I was born female. So that's how I identify. So that part's not challenging at the doctor, other than when it comes to talking about like birth control, and how many women don't anyway. So maybe that would be an easy conversation. I don't know. But that was one where I was like, well, I would like that, but it doesn't meet the rules.
Okay.
For me, number 23 was being able to go to a public restroom without fear of threat. Like I kind of looked at it the same way Allison did, as far as what can I cut out, and there are a lot of ones that were relating to kids that I could cut out pretty easily because I'm not really sure if I want kids going forward. But like definitely, you know, things relating to bathrooms jumped out at me real quick.
Anybody else have anything they'd like to share? Anything you found particularly difficult? Anything you found really, I mean, some of you guys shared what you found easy. Did anybody have not a lot of money to have a restriction on how much they could spend and got really annoyed by it? No, most people had the dollar restriction. Okay. I've done this with a couple of other groups, and so it's interesting when you have a mix. Not so much this time around. The way I don't have too much of a mix, but usually what I do is I put people into groups and I assign each group. So it doesn't matter where you fall on any spectrum. Some groups I'll say, you know, hey, you have, you know, $15 to spend, everything's $1. And then some people, but it's just something to kind of get you all thinking about privileges. So as was pointed out by Kelly, this is basically a list of straight cis privilege. So everything on this particular list is things that if that's the identifications you fall under, you have all of these. For people who have LGBT, it comes and goes. You could have 6, you could have 10, you could have none of these privileges. And so we've been throwing around the word privilege a lot, and if my screen is good to go, let's see. We're going to talk about the word of the day. The word of the day is privilege. There it is. So, as I've been throwing this word around a lot, what is it? So to oversimplify, privilege shows up in 2 ways. Ways society is organized to give you advantages, and ways you aren't penalized for who you are. So the idea and goal is to overcome privilege and oppression. They're 2 sides of the same coin. Oppression being homophobia, racism, misogyny, transphobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism of various groups. So to quote Sam Killerman, who I quote a lot, if whiteness is how you got your job, or maleness is why your opinion is received as fact, or straightness is why your parental fitness is unquestioned, then a socially just world is one where your job, your opinion, parenthood, and more aren't granted based on those identities. This is where the advantage is taken away. Now, I get into this conversation a lot with a lot of people, and I do want to note something very important. Having privilege does not mean that an individual is immune to life's hardships. What it means is you have an unearned benefit or advantage one receives in society by nature of their identity. So you can still be white and have, you know, a hard life. Things can go wrong. You can be black and have the same thing. You can be LGBT and you have it really easy. Doesn't mean that you don't have or not have certain privileges. So I'm going to give some examples now of privileges to kind of give you guys a perspective on what we're dealing with. So I'm going to start with male privilege because it's my favorite, because every single time I get people who are like, what? Yeah. So the object of this is to make everybody kind of think and realize what their privileges are that you may not have in the past. So if you're a male, if you are, and by the way, I'm sticking, when I talk about male, I'm saying cis male, which I'll come to in a second. So if you're a male, you can expect to be paid equitably for the work you do and not paid less because of your gender. Most of your political representatives share your gender, especially the ones at the top. You can go to a car dealership or a mechanic and assume you'll get a fair deal and not be taken advantage of. I'm seeing faces. This is great. If you have a bad day or are in a bad mood, people aren't going to blame it on your gender. If you go on a date with a stranger, you can do so without fear. If you're straight and decide to have children with your partner, you can assume that it will not affect your career. Welcome to being a man. All right. However, there's more to it. Oh, scroll didn't work. All right. So we're going to talk about white privilege. With race being the forefront of national conversations right now, I would be remiss if I did not talk about race. So white privilege. If your skin is white or you can pass as white, you can go shopping alone most of the time, and you're pretty well sure that you will not be followed or harassed. If you need legal or medical help, race will not work against you. I can speak in front of a powerful group, and my race will not be used against me. I can take a job with affirmative action employer without being suspect to my coworkers of getting the job due to my race. My neighbors will most likely be pleasant to me. And if a traffic cop pulls me over or the IRS audits me, I can be sure it's not because of my race. Just as a heads up, I will later on drop in the resource where I pulled all this stuff. These were like 6 of like 100 that I pulled off of this particular list. Yes, thank you, Marianne. As was just pointed out, getting paid equitably when it comes is only true for white males. Yes, you're absolutely correct. That's why I jumped into race. Just because you are male, if there's another privilege group that supersedes it, white is going to supersede men of color every time. So that is why I jumped into race next. That is a very good point to bring up, because black men do get paid less than white men and white women. So moving on to that, cis. If you guys if you're not familiar with the word or you haven't seen my other trainings where I do talk about what cisgender means, it means that you identify as the gender you were assigned at birth. So you're born, they tell you you're a female, and you're like, yeah, I agree with that. That's what cis is. So if you're cis, if you end up in an emergency room, you don't have to worry about that. Your gender will keep you from receiving appropriate treatment. You can easily find role models and mentors who emulate and share your identity. You can use public facilities such as gym locker rooms and store changing rooms without stares, fear, or anxiety. You can walk through the world and generally blend in, not being constantly stared at, gawked at, whispered about, pointed at, laughed at because of your gender expression. And you can go places with friends on a whim, knowing that there will be bathrooms that you can use. These are basically things that trans people have to deal with on a regular basis. So moving into the LGBT community, we already talked about how our list was straight privilege. So I grabbed a few of my favorites that I like to point out, but these are examples of straight privilege. Paid leave when you're grieving for the death of your partner, going to the doctor and getting treatment that doesn't conflict with your identity, having multiple positive TV role models. It's great that we live in a time where we're seeing more and more LGBT people who are not side bits or killed off in the first 10 seconds. It's great to finally see some of that representation, but we're still far from it. In a recent study, still less than like 2 or 3% of all characters on TV are LGBT. So it's still not too representative of the population. But you can raise children without worrying about state intervention. You can see your partner immediately if there's an accident. You can be employed as a preschool, elementary school teacher or a scout leader without people assuming you're going to corrupt the children, which has been said to me, even when I worked professionally for the Boy Scouts. So it does happen. Now, you may be asking yourself, well, the one thing that I do want to bring, so I have to jump into this, is I am a cis white male. So even though I'm LGBT, I'm luckier than most because some of my privileges supersede the LGBT one, but it does depend on where in the world I go. And the reason I bring this up is because I found this wonderful graphic today. These are the sexual orientation laws in the world as of last year. So this is a wonderful map. You will notice that this is why it's important to understand why your straight privilege is important for those of you watching this later or now who identify as straight and cis. The blue, those are protections against discrimination based on sexual orientation, and there's a gambit. The dark blue that you see in like Mexico, Bolivia, and one of the honestly, my geography is awful, and I can't tell you what country that is up there because the map's
Denmark.
Thank you, Denmark. Denmark and South Africa. You'll notice that they, with the exception of Mexico and
Or Sweden.
Bolivia, it's I can zoom in on the map later, but I didn't take a look and that's my fault. But you'll notice that they're dark blue, which means that they have constitutional protections for the people who are living in the country who identify as LGBT. Now, if you see the two green, that means that their marriage is protected, and adoption to same-sex couples is also protected and allowed. We do have the United States, but you'll notice that the United States on this particular map has limited or uneven protections because we have 50 states and a couple territories, and everybody votes on that differently. We don't have overarching constitutional federal protections. I did not feel like ruining everybody's evening by going into the protections and laws in the United States. That'll be a training for another day. But to the other side of the gambit, if you see the orange, red, dark red, and the beige, those are countries where it's criminal to be LGBT. So something to keep in mind when you're like, oh, well, you know, I may be privileged, but, you know, you're pretty privileged. You can pretty much go to any one of those countries, and other issues aside, being straight will not be an issue for you. All right, so the question on a lot of people's minds at this point is, okay, Alex, you've thrown a lot of things about privilege at me, and you know how privileged I am, and I get it. But what can I do? How can I use my straight privilege to help you out and help out the LGBT community? Well, I'm glad you thought and asked that. So this is part of being an ally. You have taken the first step. The first step is identifying that you have privilege. The second step is to identify that people who lack your privilege and understand what they encounter in terms of challenges. So as I've been talking about in the previous slide with the LGBT community, it's very important to understand that LGBT people have to deal with this stuff all the time. But your third is to look for opportunities to speak and act. Ask questions, raise concerns, add perspective, be a voice where underprivileged people like the LGBT community aren't being heard. We are not heard everywhere. And sometimes, as soon as it comes to light that we're LGBT, people don't want to listen anymore. But straight cis people, allies to the community, can absolutely step up and say, well, I'm straight and I'm part of, that privilege, and I'm going to use it now to raise the voice. But that brings us to the fourth step. Going from 3, be mindful of inadvertently speaking over the group you are supporting. It's not about you sometimes, and that's okay. We can speak for ourselves in the LGBT community. So when we can, let us speak. We know you mean well, but be mindful that when you're speaking, that if there's an opportunity for us to speak, you let us. So as I said earlier in the presentation, I thanked Dali Chu, who wrote the article in which I borrowed these steps from. I did put the link on the presentation, but I will throw it in later with the resources. If you'd like to give the whole article a read, it's a really good one. Speaking of wonderful resources, some additional resources. My personal favorite, the Safe Zone Project. They have a ton of links and other resources on there. If you really want to get in the nitty-gritty of other presentations that I've given and see like what I left out or what can be added, Safe Zone Project's a great one. But they have links all over the World Wide Web, including they're sponsored by the Trevor Project, which helps LGBTQ youth in all sorts of fashions, from homes, for those who are kicked out of homes. So if you're looking for a place to give your money this June and not a corporation with a rainbow on it, Trevor Project is one I recommend. Another additional resource where I pulled some stuff from this evening is Everyday Feminism has a 101 on what is privilege. It's more from the woman's perspective, but it's still a great, like, what is privilege and how you can use it. So definitely worth another link to check out. And another great website run by Sam Killerman, I'm sorry, is it's pronounced metrosexual.com. And this is an online resource that covers the whole gambit. And he also believes, unlike me, in being very brief about what he's saying. So he has a, did I do it in 300 words or less counter. So if the article's not 300 words or less, he's like, hey, just a heads up, this might be a read. But they're great, very concise, very brief. He has things on privilege. He has things on that. If you would like a bit more of a different perspective on talking about privilege, I do recommend a video I found called Sometimes You're a Caterpillar. It's a great little animated video about a snail and a caterpillar who are best friends, and they go to a party. So it's a great little video that it's about 3 minutes long, so if you could take some time to look it up and watch it tonight. It's a great, very simple, this is what privilege is. If your instant thought is, I'm going to show this to my kid, just a heads up, there are some mild sexual themes in it. Because they are going to a party. The caterpillar has plans. So it's very brief. It's nothing, out of the ordinary. But if you're like, I'm gonna put my 5-year-old in front of this, don't do that. But great video, definitely worth a watch. Command slides. So as I said, I was very proud of this presentation in the very beginning. these are the people who put the slideshow together. I added all my own content, but the colors and the images are all theirs. So, you know, if you need one, Slides Mania, a great place to go. I figured it was only right to give them some credit. So thank you. Thank you for coming. Next week, I'm going to be doing coming out. So to end this, one of the great privileges of being straight is you don't have to come out to anyone. And gay people, we have LGBT people in general, we have to do this our entire lives. I have to come out to people on a regular basis. You know, I had to come out to someone just last week, and I mentioned my boyfriend, and they're like, oh, okay. Sometimes not a big deal, but the point is, it's a privilege to not have to come out to people because everyone assumes, and that's the status quo. So next week, because especially if you're watching LGBT content and trying to learn and be a safe space, you're going to have someone who's going to come out to you. It's going to happen eventually. So my job is going to prepare you for it. So I'm going to talk about coming out do's and don'ts next week. You know, things that you're going to be like, whoa, I never actually thought that that was a terrible thing to say. Because I've also been caught some of the pitfalls. So we're going to talk about that. And if I remember my own schedule correctly, I think that same evening, about an hour later, I'm going to do a Facebook Live one on the history of Pride Month. Because June is Pride Month, and I'm very excited for that, even though we're all stuck indoors for it. But there's some great history on the LGBT community. There's some great history behind Pride Month. I've been doing a couple of it with Movement Mondays, but I'm going to really ramp it up during Pride Month because I could do one every day, which you'll all get tired of, but I won't. But I won't run out of people. So there are tons and tons of people and stories out there who are LGBT. And my goal is to kind of normalize that there are LGBT people out there doing great, amazing things. If there is something you want to learn, or if there's a question, please feel free to reach out. Please tell me, hey, Alex, I'd love to see a workshop or a topic on this. And as I tell people all the time, I'm gay, I've worked with kids, and I went to art school. There's very little you're going to be able to say to me that's going to throw me. So have at it, try your best. But in all seriousness, if you do have a question or do want to know something, please feel free to reach out. If you're watching this later, again, still goes. And we'll go with that. All right, so I'm going to take some questions now because I do see them popping up. All right, so questions. Actually, you know what? Because I can take some time to think about this. I'm going to stop recording. So everyone, real quick, have a great evening. It was wonderful to see you here. And we will see you hopefully next week. Yes, I do want to stop.